Good morning. This is the first recording on a new computer, and it's the first of the month. So, I would suppose that typically one would have a decent amount of things to talk about, what with previous month ending. But honestly, I've been so busy with working lately that I have not really had much time for self development aside from eh, being able to finally sit down right now for the first time in about a week and actually have a little bit of time to myself. It's quite jarring going from several days where everything is focus to having free time. It's hard to internalize the ability to relax after you've been quote unquote on for an extended period of time. And with the new computer, trying to set up all the things as they once were, I tried to run a few tests. I think that the microphone that I'm using might need some tweaking because it has a significantly higher amount of buzz in the background, which is strange considering there is significantly less background noise. So I'm wondering if that's not like a function of the gain or something, but I don't even know how much I'll be able to mitigate that. Maybe it's the fact that my keyboard cord keeps going onto it. It could be just bad power. It could be any number of things. I don't know. I'll try and figure it out, and if not, it's whatever, I guess. But this is the weird in-between phase of having woken up but not gotten the full ritual of morning wakefulness up out of the way, because woke up, had breakfast, had a social interaction, but didn't go for my morning walk, which usually occurs before I speak to anyone. So I'm sort of out of sorts, finding it hard to self motivate. And I believe that in so doing, I may have discovered that what I had been labeling anxiety is actually something incredibly useful. Um, as it were, it's it's um, it's a way of motivating oneself and thinking at a quicker and more focused way than normal. It can be incredibly detrimental if you allow it to be, and I certainly had. But over several years, I'm starting to realize that sometimes your greatest weakness can be turned into one of your greatest strengths. As I had been struggling for several days to finish an assignment, um, the anxiety hadn't kicked in yet. And then the day before it was due, I was anxiously focusing, and the amount of focus that I was able to gain was more than I had ever been able to focus throughout those 3 days of attempting. And in so doing, I was able to finish what what I needed to do in the span of approximately an hour. So it might be something to look into. It might just be another weird subdivision of my version of reality, or it might be something that other people could make use of at some point. More research is required, but you could say that about a lot of things in the sphere of influence that we call the world. It's hard to quantify things in this day and age with you have to be able to prove things to an extent. There beyond a shadow of a doubt, is nigh impossible, since statistically speaking, you can only ever be 99.7% sure of almost anything, because there are always statistical outliers. So how do you prove that something is or isn't the way you have seen it, or the way that it has been in past experiments? Well, you prove by being able to repeat something that had happened. If it is a occurrence that is a repeatable offense, it's not the outlier, it's not the fluke, it is the normative model, the normal distribution, as it were. And we can find ways to expound upon such things as normativeness is what would it normal isn't really a thing as humans would have it discussed. Normal simply means statistically higher than 50% of population is affected in a standard distribution. So, what do we mean when we say normal in the current sense? Most people would say, well, adhering to the norms and mores of a society. But it's more than that, because humanity has underlying truths to it that supersede the societies that we live in. The world's as we see them, the world as we see it, rather, since we have no true access to other worlds currently, but we're hoping for that in the future. But the world as we have it is what we've made it because we are such an industrious species. That does not mean that we are without flaws, and in fact, our flaws can lead to such leaps and bounds in logic that we hadn't been able to incorporate into thoughts before. For there are things that the quote-unquote normal wouldn't consider. Statistical outliers are one of the most fascinating things to occur in nature, and most humans are, in their own way, even if they fall under the normal scope. Most people are a statistical outlier in some way or another. It's just a question of which functionality they have their statistical outlier falling under. And people would always be able to say, oh, it's a generalization. But I have not found a single person in this world who was not unique. So even when you're falling within the norm, you still have parts of you that are not falling within the norm, which is not a bad thing. This is, in fact, the reason that humanity is able to make its leaps and bounds in terms of progress, in terms of being able to be more than what we are on paper, as every human is more than the sum of its parts. It's just hard for some people to be able to see that, and I am grateful that I live in the world that I do, surrounded by the situations that I am in, so that I am able to see the truths for what I am able to see them for. And I hope that eventually I am able to spread my views, not necessarily to say that my views are particularly unique, but so that other people who have been in similar situations, who have had very little self-worth, are more likely to be able to start to value themselves again, as I am starting to do.